All right, let's get started. If you have the handout, awesome. If you don't, it's okay. I'm going to try to cover a lot within the next an hour and a half. I'm going to leave some time for questions and answers. But before I get started, can I get a raise of hands? How many of you guys are freshmen? Okay. Sophomore? Juniors? Okay. And then entering seniors? Okay. So I'm going to do a little bit of everything. All right, and I'll try to go as fast but slow enough so that everyone can follow. If you have any specific questions, if you wouldn't mind waiting until the end. So one thing I want to say about academic planning for high school students is that it's actually very different student per student. And a lot of your high schools make you sound like you're exactly the same student. Okay, because they are actually, a lot of your high school counselors are doing two things. One, planning your classes, and two, trying to make sure that each student passes their classes. So they don't really have a lot of time to do like college planning and talk to you about all of these things. Like, that's the reason why I'm here. So a lot of public schools, the ratio is like, 200 to 250 students per one counselor, depending on the grade. And then I know that your counselors change from year to year, so you don't have that relationship with them. So it's really hard, okay? My name is Soo Kim. I always forget to introduce myself every time I talk, but I've been doing this for about over 15 years, so I'm kind of old. But I've been doing this for a long time, so I could see all of the transitions. I work with a lot of students from the Irvine School District. So I'm actually a private academic counselor, and also I'm a college consultant. So I've been doing a little bit of everything. I also have international students. So my students just come from all over, right? But 99.9% of my students are Asian. So that's the reason why I'm here, okay? Because the statistics for Asian students applying to college is very different. So if you look at the numbers, it doesn't always pertain to your ethnic group, right? So that's another reason. So if you take a look at the handout, if you have it, you're gonna see the proportion. So freshman year, sophomore year, and junior year, notice that it just starts to grow a little bit more, right? So depending where you are, it depends on how much time you have to what you need to do in that time, right? So one of the things that I really want to stress is that I'm not here to cause you additional stress, because you guys are already stressed enough, right? I'm just trying to make sure that things are understandable, that there's a lot of misconceptions and myths. You hear it from your family members. Some of you guys have parents that read the Korean newspaper or the Chinese newspaper, whatever it is. And then you have friends that tell you things. And then you have the great right before you that went to college. And so there's a lot of chatter. Some of that stuff is really correct, and a lot of it is not, because those stats pertain to that person or that, that circumstance. It doesn't necessarily pertain to you, okay? So what I want to start off with, it really depends on your goals, and your goals will change. So as a freshman, as a sophomore, as a junior, and so forth, right? Because I have students from every grade level, and every time I have a counseling meeting, I always ask them, what do you think your goals are? And they change over the years. So don't feel like once you say that you want to be something, you have to commit to it for the next 4 years. That's not how it works, because you don't know enough, right? And the other thing is, it depends on the academic rigor of your high school and the district that you're a part of. So they always stress that you want to take advantage of what's offered at your high school. So let's say you go to a high school, they don't have a lot of APs, but your friend goes to a high school that offers APs at the freshman level. You're not competing with your friend. You're competing with what's offered at your school and what you can make the best of, right? So if you notice in schools, if I say do the best that you can, you guys will all hear it differently. Your parents will think you must make an A in your class. You will hear it as, well, I suck at math, so I think the best I can do is a B, right? And then your parents are thinking, no, you will be getting an A, right? So you're just hearing it all differently at all times, right? So I want to just start with freshman year. These are the things that comprise basically your academic calendar, which is your classes, your activities. And your activities comprised of basically clubs. Because of COVID, things have changed a lot. So depending on what years you were in COVID, it's going to mean that you had a reduced number of things that you were actually able to do. But it doesn't mean that you were supposed to have done nothing at all, right? And you can't use that as an excuse anymore. Because on the college applications, they would ask, how did COVID impact you? But if you're a freshman now, I think that question will disappear by the time you apply to college, right? So the information that you hear today will change, right? Depending on the grade that you're in. So I want you to be mindful of that. And that's the reason why you guys are overwhelmed, because you're hearing information that's old, and so you think, oh, does it still apply to me? And you're hearing information that happened during COVID. So this is why I get a lot of the SAT and ACT questions, which I will address later, right? And it also depends on your circumstances. I'm gonna keep on saying that, right? So don't think of this as a formula, it's an outline, a template, right? And it doesn't mean that if you do everything exactly right, you're gonna go to Harvard. That's not how it works either, okay? So just wanted to let you know. So in your freshman year, you need to be doing something besides your academics, because all colleges are stressing community involvement. They want you to not only be involved in your community, but they would like for you to be involved in your college community when you get there. They don't want you to come in, take all of their resources, and it's just you. They want you to contribute. And so basically they pick students, they call it well-rounded, but each school is different. They're looking to see that, one, that you were participating, if not in your school, then you're in your community. Community service, volunteering, part of a club, being part of sports, all of that counts, okay? But you have to do enough of it on a year-to-year basis. You can't be all of a sudden a junior and be like, you know what, I'm gonna do all of my activities this year. They're gonna see that, because you also have to do, what you have to also show in your college application is what year, how many hours per week, per year, stuff like that. So they're also seeing, were you just only contributing only your junior year? If it was because of COVID, that makes sense. But if you did nothing until your junior year, that says something about you that's gonna have an impact on how they're gonna evaluate you. If you ask me for a percentage, I will not give you one, because it depends on the college, but they want you to be involved. So what I'm saying is, all of the things that church always asks you to do, like food pantry or Pastor Sam, hello, do it, right? It'll help you be part of the community. That's what they want also, but also it contributes to your community service hours. And some of your high schools will have that. You will have to have a certain number of hours per year, right? And that would change based on the high school that you go to. Now, for your clubs, some of your clubs in your high schools are not, they don't do anything. And that's why a lot of my students say they don't want to go to a club, because they sit there during lunch and basically talk, and that's it. Your club has to do something, right? So even if you're part of a club that sounds like really great, like Scientists of America, that club does not exist, but let's say it did. And basically you sit there and you watch like The Blue Planet or a documentary, that doesn't count. Because what happens is, when you have to write about it later in your college essays, they not only want to know like what you did, but literally, what did you do in the club? If you say you were the vice president of finance, so fancy. But I always ask my students when they have a fancy title like that, like what did you do? They're like, well, I just counted some money during lunch. I was like, okay, no, it's not gonna work, right? So you have to be doing something. I mean, if you notice, I keep on saying that, please do something. Not because it's good for your college application, but honestly, it's really for you, so that you know what's out there. Because your high school classes are very limiting. If you base what you want to do and who you want to be based on the classes that you've taken, it makes it really difficult for you. And then you're going to get stressed out and be anxious, because you're like, is this the only things that I'm going to look at to decide my future? It's not. So get out there. And so especially entering freshmen, or if you're going into your sophomore year, during your summer, do things, like if there's things that you like to do, go out and try it. Our church is huge. There's a lot of professionals. You should just shadow someone for a week if you can. Like, I want to know what, like ask your mom, she's part of a Bible study group, or your dad, like ask them, I'm really interested. Is there any way that I can like shadow this person for like a day? They would love that, because then you get an early introduction to things that you might possibly like. And for those of you that are having trouble in your academic classes, that might be the motivation for you to pull through. because maybe your math class isn't enough. Some of you guys are just like natural studiers, like you just study, and yeah, but you got to do other things, you see. And then for some of you, like most people struggle, right? So if you look at a class, 98% of that class, they're not going to get A's. There's a grade distribution, right? So someone's got to get that B, someone's got to get that C, and it might be you, right? And it could be that you tried really hard, but that's your grade. Well, then that's fine, but try other things too. Don't let that grade define you, because it's not all about grades. It can be largely about grades depending on the school that you're applying to, right? And then prep. Okay, for those of you that, this is a money-saving advice, parents, so hopefully, please take this. If your student reads and writes and they don't give it up, like in junior high, a lot of boys do. By the time they hit 7th grade, they're like not reading, right? That is the single one factor that can be a big factor later on, because the reading helps with critical thinking, critical analysis. The more you read, the better you're going to be a writer too. So you're going to have to write essays later for colleges. You have to talk about yourself. And most of the world is introverts, so we don't really talk about ourselves. And in high school, they teach you to write, but they teach you to write high school essays. So basically, when the question, like for the UCs, they have 8 questions, you have to write on 4 for your college application. One of the question is, what is your greatest skill or talent? This is what the question they ask. And how did you develop it over time? All of my students focus on the word greatest, and they get stuck. It makes them really anxious. They're like, greatest? What am I really great at, right? But I asked them to remove that word and focus on talent and skill. The thing is, all of you guys compare and contrast with your friends. You're like, well, that girl is so awesome at this. That means I don't have that talent because I'm not as good as her. Or you're like, I recognize these things are talents and these things are not. Like your resilience, your ability to bounce back after failure, that is a talent. Okay? It's not just sports, music, singing, it's not all of those things. But you have to write an essay that demonstrates that through like specific incidences, not just what you think in your head, right? And that's why those activities are important, right? So you can connect those two things, right? The other thing is, in those kind of essays, that's why your list of activities is important to draw from. The reading and writing, that's where this, that's something that's developed over time. So it's really hard to be able to do that like that, right? Because all of my students write like this: my greatest talent and skill are, and that's how you guys are taught to write essays in high school. So as soon as I see that, I delete it. I'm like, okay, we can't do that, right? And that the reading and the writing will help with that. Before you hit your 10th grade, you should read, you should write. I know a lot of you guys are like gonna tell me, I don't like to read, I'm a slow reader. I'm gonna say, do it anyway. You will help yourself, you will help your parents later on, and you will also help yourself in your academic classes. Because one of the things that you got to realize, that all the things that you're learning in high school, it's not a what. You're not supposed to memorize everything and know all the details of your bio class or AP Chem or physics. That's not what high school is really designed for. They want you to be able to learn how to think through and reason, so that when you get to college, their expectation is you already have those skills. But if you heard Pastor Keith's sermon, well, the parents did, he said that we're struggling in America. We're far behind. And that's the reason why you have the SATs that have changed like over 3 times. They put things on the SATs and ACTs that they see that their freshman year class in college are struggling with. Guess what they're struggling with? Writing. So that's why for a long time essays were on the SATs and the ACTs. Another thing that students were struggling with was graphs. Like, we can't read graphs. So they put graphs on the SATs. I kid you not. They put graphs in the grammar section. They put it everywhere they could, because they're saying, look, we need to work on these skills, right? So all the things in high school that you're learning is so that you would be able to, 1, time management. I know, I sound like a business person, but I'll go into it a little bit more. 2 is so that you know how to, when you're reading something, you know what to pick up. You're like, what is the main point? what are they really asking me to do? The reason why that is that when you go to college, your classes are going to be really like a couple of weeks long. It can be anywhere from 9 weeks to 15 weeks, depending on your college. And most of the time, they'll give you only 2 tests. And they'll give you a big fat book to read. Okay, now it's like online. It's not literally a book, but they demand a lot of you within a short amount of time. You're like, how can I read 500 pages in an hour? Answer, you can't. The point is that you would pick up the main points. Why is that important? When you get a job, your boss is going to ask you to do things that you can't do within a time. So guess what? You have to think, what does my boss want? What is the main point? That's how it all translates. Like what you learn in high school, the skills, you take to college so that you can further develop them, and then you get a job that you can use them. That's how it's supposed to be designed, but all of you guys are really stuck because it's just so much information all the time. Right? And it's always coming at you left, right, and then you're hearing it all the time. So that's why I'm saying reading and writing, the summer between your freshman year and your sophomore year, community service, do some things, right? So that it gets you outside of the classroom. If you stay within a box too long, which is your classroom, you're gonna think that everything is in that box, right? And it's not. Right? And it's depressing. It causes a lot of anxiety because then if you look in that box, there's like 35 other students with you, right? And guess what? Then you play that comparison game. Oh, am I better than this person? Am I like lower than this person? But it's not just the box. There's like this big world, around you. So you need to go out. It will make you feel happy too. Like you got to do other things that give you joy. All right. So I covered quite a lot, but really for freshmen, they say the path is when they give you your classes and you're like, oh my God, this is so easy. Yeah, there's a reason why they're easy sometimes. It's because they're asking you to build some of these skills. But your freshman year is not your sophomore year. It's not your junior year. So you might start off with easy classes in your freshman year. For those of you guys that are juniors going into your senior year or your sophomores going to your junior year, you can relate to this. Because think about the number of difficult classes that you've taken your freshman year versus your sophomore year. It doubles or it quadruples during your junior year, and you guys are not prepared for it. It's not your fault, but it is because you're the one who's going to college, you see. So that's the reason why time management is important. If it takes you a long time to do something, you got to realize like later on, it can't take you that long anymore. For those of you that are perfectionistic students that are just like, you got to get everything just right, you will have a nervous breakdown. I guarantee it, because you can't do all of that, right? And my main concern is 1, create less stress over a period of time, but 2, create mental health is important, so that really, I think that your dreams are really important, but how can you dream when you're inundated with so much stuff first, right? Your dreams are actually the thing that's gonna motivate you to get through the classes that are very difficult for you to get to. Right? You're not going to like all of your teachers. Some of your teachers don't really teach. I already know this because my students talk to me all the time about it. But it doesn't matter because you can go to college and your professor could be kind of speaking a foreign language. That can happen because they're expert in their fields, right? Especially if you go into STEM. I'm not stereotyping, but I kind of am. Right? Because that can happen. You're not always going to have the greatest teachers, so you're going to have to figure it out. Right? And the more you can figure it out when you're in high school, the better it will be for you. So if you take a look at your sophomore year, it's going to be the same setup, except I added summer. And then I added SAT and ACT prep. I know you have a lot of questions about this. Okay. So for UCs and CSUs, for those of you that are applying this year, you already know you don't need the SATs. Okay. Unless you are not born in the United States and that you're on an F1 visa. I don't know if that's anyone, but I'm just saying, like, that's going to change. Because usually SATs and ACTs are also used to see whether or not you meet English language requirements, okay? That's an alternate way of looking at it. The other thing is, during the pandemic, most colleges, if not all colleges, gave students a pass. They said, we will not be looking at your ACTs and SAT scores. Was it because they were good-hearted? No, it's because there was a lawsuit that was lost by the UCs. And so there was a lot of students that could not go for testing, so they made it mandatory for everyone that it could be waived. So people are like, yay, that means I don't have to study for this test. I'm like, but wait a minute. It's not that this was part of the college requirement and they took it out and you didn't have to do anything more. That is not true. All of a sudden, what it did was your grades weighed more. Your activities weighed more. So I'm gonna go, I'm gonna switch around a little bit and tell you that, the number one question I get asked is, what is everything worth? You're gonna find that on the second page where it says colleges, where to start. Okay, I'm just going to integrate this in now since SATs and ACTs, most students start prepping, I would say traditionally the summer of their, before they enter their senior year, okay? Sometimes they do that. This is very traditional. We don't do that anymore, okay? You notice there's a lot of SAT and ACT testing places and all your parents make you go to them early on, okay? What it is that now, because you have to take your PSATs during your junior year in October, you study for the SATs basically the summer after your sophomore year, right? And then you prepare for it right up until you take it in your junior year, right? So usually for SATs, you take it in August or October, right? For those of you, depending on your school system, you start school mid-August or late August. That's why I always ask my students, can you just take it then? Because you're gonna get more classwork and things like that, so it's gonna be harder for your October test, okay? Because I'm all about time management, and because I already know what the student's schedule is like, I'm just trying to maximize when you'll be more present, less stressed, so that you can get these things done and be prepared, okay? So usually the summer after your sophomore year, you start prepping, okay? How do you decide how much you have to prep? Well, you just take a practice diagnostic test and you see what your score looks like. And then, next question is gonna be, well, what should I be scoring? My question to you is gonna be where do you wanna go to school and what is gonna be your major, okay? That determines a lot of things, okay? But if you're I don't know, what score should I be aiming for? I'm really gonna say, let's see what your score looks like, okay? Because you can take the SATs or the ACTs. ACTs is a speed test. Remember when I talked a little bit about you need to start reading? This is why. ACTs is not a hard test, but you gotta go fast. A lot of my students will tell me this. Okay, so if it's around a 4-hour test, they're well, I took a section every day. Okay, when you run a mile, it's 4 laps. You can't do 1 lap every day because you're gonna get your best numbers every single day. And you can't combine and go, look, this is my score. It's not your score. All the testing is for test fatigue. How are you gonna perform in hour 2, in hour 3? Okay? It's not when your mind is fresh because none of your minds are fresh at 8 in the morning unless you're a morning riser, right? So they test you between 8 and 12. You're functional between 9:30 and 10 and you tap out around 2 and then you need a break. That's how students, but that's not how they're testing you. They're looking at you from 8 to 12, right? For that testing period. So that means that the way to practice is actually to take long tests. And then the reason why you start practicing in the summer after your sophomore year is because you had 2 years of English and 2 years of math, so you should be better at it at that point. If you take it earlier, your numbers are gonna look kind of funky. You're gonna be oh my gosh, I have so much to do. Well, schooling helps, the 2 years. Okay, but because of the COVID times, some of you guys have been held back because you didn't have a lot of access. So that's why you start seeing numbers that are not consistent with years prior to COVID. Okay, if you know me a little better, you'll find out that I'm all about numbers too, because I like to look at the numbers year by year to see what's happening. Because colleges are changing their minds about things and they're making changes, okay? So for your sophomore year, if you guys are sophomores going into junior year and you're oh my goodness, I did not do any prep, it's still okay. Just take a practice test, take a look at where your numbers are. Some things you can just practice on your own, okay? So if you're a slow reader, you gotta get faster, okay? For the SATs, it's more of why. So they ask you a lot of questions about why is this a main point, right? What is the best evidence? Both of these tests have grammar, You have not been introduced to grammar since maybe you were in 6th grade or 7th. If you took a foreign language, you had some grammar. Some of you have been, were born here, so you have a natural kind of grammar. You're gonna hit the 60, 70% mark on the test. You're like, you got generally more than half, like 60% right on the test, but you can't go past that. It's because you don't know the rules. So you're kind of feeling it out. You're like, this sounds right. That's gonna kind of work for you some of the time, but not all the time. That's why they have those testing preparation over the summer and things like that available, right? Those of you that are gonna be that are entering your freshman year, or if you have your parents, they have like younger children, the test is gonna change in about 1.5 years, 2 years. They're gonna make it digital, and they're gonna do it so that it's not gonna be like close to a 4-hour test, it's gonna be 2.5 hours. And this is how they're gonna do it. You're gonna start taking the test, and then if you start getting things wrong, they're gonna put you into an easier module. So you're gonna start getting easier questions. And if you start getting harder questions right, they're gonna put you in a more difficult module, so you're gonna basically get a better score. That's how they're gonna change it up. So they're gonna do it based on how you're answering the test. Does it sound less stressful or more stressful? I would think more stressful, because now you're like, every question counts. But they're gonna make it so that it's much easier in terms of time, right? So they're just gonna segment. They're gonna give you like a paragraph and a couple of questions. Right now they give you a whole section, right? So you have to, you have to go through, like, you gotta like retain a lot of information and try to answer those questions. So that's what I told you, that depending on what grade you are right now, it's gonna change, right? So if you're like, what if you're in between? You just keep practicing on the old tests, and then you'll still be okay for the tests that are coming up, okay? SATs and ACTs, it depends on the school. Some schools are going to tell you that it's test optional, okay? Some schools are going to tell you that it's recommended. They're not going to use the word recommended. They're going to use another word called flexible, right? Which means you should still take it. And if you take it and your scores are not good, don't use them. But if your scores are good, then use them. That's my policy. You're like, what if my scores are bad? I was like, well, then we're not going to use them, as long as the school is flexible about it, right? So that's really about the SATs and the ACTs. But regardless of the grade that you are, just take a diagnostic test to see how you are. And again, it gives you a gauge of how much should I be studying? What do I need to work on? Okay. The other thing another question I often get asked is about community college courses. Okay. So sometimes students will take these because your schools don't offer these classes. And you're like, let's say you want to go into like sociology, and they don't offer like a sociology class in your high school. Then I would recommend, okay, see if you can take it, whether for college credit or as a free class, you can do that. Your high schools are designed so that if you want to take classes that they already offer, they're going to say no. They will not like for you to take it at a community college level. The other thing I also have is students where they take community college classes too early. Okay, the number one thing I watch out for when I'm counseling students is burnout. The number of activities they're already doing, what they really feel like they're capable at that particular time in their life, and their mental health. Okay, because you could be doing fantastic your freshman year, and then you're going to burn out your sophomore year. I see that a lot, especially after COVID. So then it's like you're the same student. You are inquisitive, you're curious. All of you are. You just like certain things, right? Maybe it's not that math class, or maybe it's not environmental science or physics, but you like things. Okay. The thing is, when you try to do too much too early, or too much too late because you feel like, oh my goodness, I don't have enough, it has the same effect. You burn out. And you don't know it because you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Okay? I like to try to prevent that. That's why I like preparedness, right? So regardless of where you are right now in terms of your grade, whether you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, it doesn't matter. It's just think about, with the time that I have, what should be my priority, and how can I maximize that? That's how I look at all things. Okay? And then I see like how it's going to affect in terms of the colleges that you're applying to. Okay, so the community college question is really about, one, is it because there's a class at your high school and you want to take it? Great. Please take some easy community college classes, okay? The most difficult ones are advanced math classes. That's usually for my students that are in senior year where they've done AP Calculus and they plan to be like comp-sci or engineering, and then they want to take advanced level math classes. And even then, I wouldn't recommend it for like 99.9% of the students. Just the like 0.1%. And I only look at it in connection to what else are you doing? That's my question most of the time. What are you doing? What have you done? What are you thinking? Right? So it really depends on that. So doing more doesn't equal better results. Doing more actually equals worse results because you're not thinking about how much time it's actually going to take you because you don't know yet. So as a freshman, when you're looking to your sophomore year, you have no idea how much more work you're going to do because you haven't had that kind of work yet. And when you're a sophomore, you know, if you had 1 or 2 AP classes, depending on your schools, which will allow you to take 1 or 2, then your junior year, you're taking like 3 to 5. It's a lot. So you are not prepared. So that's why if you take a look at your junior year, you want to start making some preparation. So your junior classes count the most because that's the last time colleges will look at your application GPA. Okay, hear me when I say application GPA, because that means that when you look at your transcripts, you're wondering, okay, if I didn't get to take these AP classes or these like high-level classes my junior year, couldn't I just take them my senior year and it's going to be part of my GPA anyway? It is, but that's not the GPA the college will look at. Okay, because when you apply for college, what happens is you apply in the fall. The results, your grades come out in January or February. By that time, they've already started looking at your applications. So then I get the other question, then why do I have to try so hard my senior year? Isn't it just like a freebie? Can I just relax? No, you cannot relax. Here's why. Because even though it's not part of your application GPA, they look at that GPA. Because you know you're going to get acceptances back if you do early action or early decision. That means early action means that you get early notice from the colleges. That means that you have to submit your applications by 11/1 or earlier if you're applying to schools like in the Midwest, right? It's all different. Every school has a different like application deadline, and it changed. They were a little bit more graceful during COVID, and now they're yanking it back. They're going back to their old ways. So, and then you find out in December sometime, if you do early, whether or not you got into the school, like mid-December to early January, depending on your schools, okay? You're like, yay, I can just relax. My spring semester of senior year, I'm just gonna do whatever I want because I already got in. Hold on, that's not how it works, because they know about you. They know how high school students think. If you do not perform at the level that they accepted you, they can still drop you. When they said yes to you, it means yes on the condition that you, in your senior year, you perform academically fine, right? So that's like A's and B's, all right? Because all seniors, their grades start to drop. I don't care how fantastic you are. I don't care if you tell me like you have a high GPA. It will start to drop because you've done a lot. You're tired. And you've done, you know, you spend that time doing college applications. That's basically you have 2 jobs then. You're doing school, unless you're also doing sports, and then, you know, all the other things, plus the college applications. But you gotta keep going. Just enough for colleges to say when they accept you, you're good to go, right? And so your high school counselor sends your final transcripts in June. Right? So your counselor will send midterm reports, which is the first semester of your senior year, to the colleges. Okay, if those grades are bad, okay, as a counselor, I always go, please tell me, is it getting bad? You need to tell me it's getting bad, because then we can at least write a letter to the colleges and say, oh, my grades are getting bad, but I'm doing all of these things to make it better. Hopefully that's true. Because when they see those midterm grades, it can be thinking, oh, we're flagging you just in case. So it's not a complete yes then, you see? So you still need to be able to perform well enough in your senior year. Your senior year classes should not look like your junior year classes. So if you took a lot of APs, please, in your senior year, you're not doing exactly, you should be taking a little bit less. okay? So that your success rate will be higher, okay? Because you're not going to perform in the same way that you did in your junior year. Because there is, I've heard of, I've always heard of like senioritis. Some of you get that during your sophomore year. Okay, so it's not like it's a typical thing just for seniors. Like I have freshmen that have senioritis, right? And it's because there's just too much. The game that really is, you just want to make sure that you do enough so that you keep going and that you're successful at the things that you're doing, right? It's not, let me do 10 things and be successful across all 10 things. That's not what happens. You just have to build up momentum, okay? So if you're listening to me right now and you're getting like super stressed, some of you need to do a couple of things. For most of you, don't get stressed out. Just look at it in terms of what are some of the things that I need to get done this year. Usually it's just like 1 or 2 things so that I can continue on doing that the next year, right? You just want to do enough, right? But if you come to me and you tell me as a freshman, because I have a lot of freshmen that tell me that they want to go to Harvard. They do. And it's not because they know so much about it. They just know that it's a great school. That's it, right? And then, then over the next couple of years, I'll get all things from I want to be an actor to a pilot to an architect to 5 careers that all Asian people seem to go into, right? We know them: doctor, lawyer, engineer, computer science, and business, right? And depending on how your family is, then, if your family's in business, then maybe you're the next person to go into it, stuff like that. But there's more things outside of the 5 careers. And it's basically your opportunity to investigate all of those things. It's about increasing your opportunities, really. The things in your high schools, you're just gonna have to do. They already preset that for you. Every year you pick classes, you take them. But where you have a lot of flexibility and where honestly you should be really dreaming is look at other opportunities. How? YouTube. A lot of people are on YouTube anyway, Instagram. I know that there is a certain sector of our young adults or teenagers that want to be like Instagrammers or YouTubers, but that's a lot of work too. They have to have a lot of like technical knowledge. They really have to know how to use like software. It's not as easy as that. There's a lot of background stuff. So if that's something that you want to do, I'm not saying no. I'm just saying be prepared. Do stuff so that you'll be more successful in those areas. Okay. One thing I want to stress, by the time you hit your junior year, you should have 150 hours of either community service, club activities, sports, all of that stuff, okay? Because when you apply to college, for the UCs, a lot of, since all of you guys are in Southern California, most of you, I'm assuming, are going to be applying to the UCs and California State Universities, their activity section has grown. Okay, so you can put up to 25 activities. It doesn't mean that you should, and it doesn't mean that you need to. I'm just saying that because they have that big area available, it means that they're really interested in the activities that you are doing. That's what it says. And it's meaningful to them. That's how they compensate it for the fact that they're not looking at SATs and ACTs. Does AP still apply? Yes, they like APs. Okay, if you ask me, what if I did really bad on my APs? Like I got less than a 3. For UCs, for UCs in most schools, this is how they operate. This is their philosophy. They're gonna weigh things for your benefit. Okay, they're not gonna look at things and go, oh, this is why the student is not qualified. They're looking for every way in which you are qualified. Okay. For the UCs, all UCs, they use like a 12-point system and it's all weighted differently, okay? So even under the UCs, even under the 9 UCs that are available for you to apply to, even though they use the same factors, they use them very differently, okay? So that's something to keep in mind. And of course, one of the biggest factors is your grades. They're gonna be worth about 50 plus percent in terms of what they're looking at. For UCs and CSUs, they start looking at your grades from 10th grade. Does that mean your 9th grades don't count? They don't. That's not what it means. Because if you notice, depending on what classes you're taking in your 9th grade, it's going to determine what your 10th grade classes are going to be, right? Because your teacher gets to decide too. whether they want to advance you into that math class or that English class or that history class, things like that. Private schools look at grades starting from the 9th grade. In terms of how much they're looking at the 9th grade, they won't tell us, okay? But if you think about it, you're gonna know that the biggest percentage they're gonna look at is what you did between your junior year and the summer after your junior year. Because you could still take community college classes all the way until the summer before your senior year, and that can be counted as part of your college application GPA. Okay, so when you look at your transcripts, you're going to see an academic GPA and a non-academic GPA. Your non-academic GPA count things like PE, health, band, all of those grades. You did fantastic, you got A's. They do not count as academic, okay? Unless your band was like a visual performing arts, stuff like that, right? Because there's like a criteria that applies for UCs and CSUs, okay? Hopefully everything I'm saying is making sense, okay? Let me know if you need me to slow down, but I was really trying to make sure that I could cover a lot so that it could be beneficial, not so that it could cause more stress, okay? The other thing during your junior year, this is where also community colleges come into play. So let's say you did not do so well, right? Like you have a couple of grades, you're just like, I wish they were a little bit better. This is where community colleges come into play because sometimes you're taking them for grade recovery. You want to boost up your GPA. Is it going to completely wipe out the bad grade that you had before? No, because they look at high school grades because you took 1 year to make that high school grade. But for college, community college courses, they're anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks over the course of the summer, okay? So even though technically it's going to be added into your GPA and it's going to work the same way, but on the non-technical subjective side, they're not going to count as much as your AP score or AP grade, AP year, because it took you less time to do it, right? So sometimes these are things that you don't hear or you hear differently. Because I also have students who will take a lot of community college courses. That shows that you're proactive and that you're really interested in certain areas. So it might not go to your GPA, but it will give you points somewhere else. Because remember I told you that when they look at your college application, it's not just your grades, but your grades are at least worth half. Okay, so if you're like, oh my goodness, I've been a really not a great student, where could I get into now? Again, what is it that you want to do? What are you looking at, okay? Because let's say you want to be, I know this is very specific. Let's say you want to be an architecture major and you apply to USC. They will take a lower GPA if you have a fantastic portfolio. Is this true? Absolutely, I've seen it, right? But your portfolio has to be fantastic at the USC level, because I think my students here, portfolio, forget the GPA, I'll just work on my art. I was like, no, that's not what I said, right? So it depends. Like if you're really fantastic at something, and the running joke of, about Ivies or like really difficult schools is if you have a particular talent, like you're like the #1 ping pong player in the world, yes, obviously Stanford will take a look at you, but you still have to meet certain like GPA requirements. And for most of us, it's that, right? How many of us are like #1 ping pong players in the world? I asked this and I'm like, maybe someone is, right? So that means that we got to work on other things, right? We can't like look at the exception to the rules to see if we meet that, right? So that's why that's important. Over the summer, I mean, there's some programs through like UCs. There's a program called Cosmos. I'm sure, I don't know if most of you have heard of it, or usually they talk about it in your high school. So it's basically it's addressing science, technology, engineering, and math. So these are like a month programs over the summer. You have to apply to get in, and then there is a cost. But if you're really, if you're really serious about STEM and you just need more experience in engineering and things, because most high school students don't get that ability, then this is a great way for you to get that and be able to write about it in your essay. Okay, so there are courses like that. There's like summer internships. If you work, that works too. But the question is going to be, why are you working? And then I always ask my students, what are you going to do with your money? Because they ask you that question on the application. Like, what are you doing with your money? And if you tell me, like a lot of my students do, I buy lunch, or I'm saving up for that pair of sneakers, I'll say, can you put some of that in your savings account? So we could say that you are saving for college, right? So it's stuff, it's like small things like that too, right? And then if you can shadow, as I said, please do. And then if you have been doing a community, service activity, like let's say you've been volunteering at food pantry or Mary's Kitchen or things like that, then if you've been doing that since like your freshman year, and if you've been doing it for a long while, make sure that by your junior year you have some increased responsibilities. You should be doing more, not less, so that you can say, oh, over the course of the years, I've been volunteering at Mary's Kitchen, and I started off like just serving coffee, but now I get to run or coordinate or whatever it is that you do. So that will be a part of your essay too, right? And then depending on your age requirement, so that's why I put volunteering at hospital, local pet shelter in your junior year, you have to be a certain age, right? And then you're able to volunteer at places like that. Nonprofits. A lot of my students will ask me, what if I create a nonprofit? Then I'll ask them, okay, what are you gonna do in your nonprofit? And if there is like, well, and I was like, is your nonprofit going to last beyond your senior year? Are you just doing this so you can put it on your college application? Yes. Then I'll say, do something else, because that takes a lot of time to make it into a nonprofit. And you could just join another nonprofit. Just because you said you're the founder of a nonprofit is not like a ticket into that school you want to go into. Again, question is, what are you doing with your time, okay? And then the last time you can take your SATs and ACTs, I would say is August, October. If you're trying to do early schools, your senior year, you can take them past them, but the issue is you're studying for your finals. And again, your classes still count in your senior year, so that's why I try not to have my students take the SATs beyond that, because you still need good grades, okay? So I'm going to pause here and ask, is there any questions like on the freshman level, sophomore level, junior level? Because then I'm going to do a quick run through to colleges, and then I'm going to leave it open for Q&A. Okay, should I continue? Okay. I would take both tests and then look at the score. And depending on, it's the shortest amount of time that it will take for you to get a better score. Right, so I would take a look at that. If your student is not a speed reader, then it's usually the SATs if you have better math skills, because that's half the test. Yeah, but take both and then you can make a decision. But once you do, you should at least do 2 sittings, because they're going to take the highest combined score from your 2 sittings, right? So rarely do I get a student where they just ace it and we're done. I know you would love to. All my students are like, can we just be done? I was like, no. Can we try one more time so that we can have a combined better score, right? And then we can move on from that, okay? So colleges, 3 things. What is your goal, okay? So every time I meet with parents and students, I ask this question. What is the goal? What is the family's goal, right? And then I ask, how much time? Okay, and then what are your resources and preparedness? How much time will it take for us to execute what it is that you want, right? So if you tell me at the end of your junior year that you want to be an engineer, this is what I'm going to say to you. Do you have AP Calc? Do you have AP Physics? What else have you taken? I'm not saying this because I find you unworthy of being an engineering major. What I'm saying is that's what you're going to be competing with. And then if you don't have those things, what can we do? As a short-term plan, as a long-term plan. I'm not saying, no, you can't be an engineer. I'm just saying, no, we should not apply as engineering major for the college you want to go into. We should apply as something else that you have prepared for. So I like to look at everything the student has done, right? For me, that's like a roadmap. It tells me a lot of things, right? In terms of like, what is the success rate that you want to achieve? So this is where all my stats and things come into play. Most of it is just here. So if you go, okay, how about this? I'm like, well, let's think, right? I always say, well, you're Asian. So what school is it that you want to apply to? They're like, UC Berkeley. And I was like, what do you want to do? Computer science. And then I'll go, what? I said, are we going to, depending on when I meet you, I'm going to be like, are you going to do something that's computer science oriented this summer? Answer, maybe. Answer for me, yes. You must do something that's computer science oriented because it's Berkeley. Computer science is like their thing. So if you don't have that, we're already, we're already not going to be in the game. Like we need to show up in the right gear and then compete, right? So that's how I look at it. And then, so again, basics. Grades, 50%, as I said. It depends on your GPA. Okay, I'm getting a little nitty gritty. This is where you taking a lot of AP classes will not help you. So if the value of your GPA, let's say it's like you took a lot, but your GPA is like a 3.4, right? Unweighted. What it tells the colleges is that you are more of a B+ student, because in college all the pluses and minuses count. So in high school, whatever form of an A you get on an unweighted scale, it's out of a 4, okay? For the APs, community colleges, it's out of a 5, so it adds that extra weight. But if they look at your unweighted, it's out of a 4, okay? A- is a 3.7. In college, B+ is a 3.3. So if you have any siblings and you're like, why is your GPA so low? This is why. A 3.3 is a B+, 3.7 is an A-. And then if your high school GPA, you taken like, let's say 10 AP classes and your GPA is like 3.4, I'm like, oh, it's not good. Then I'll ask you, what are your AP scores? And if you tell me they're 4s and 5s, I'm like, okay, we can recover a little bit, okay? The opposite happens. You have like a 4.5 GPA, and then I ask you, what are your AP scores? They're like 2s and 3s. I'm like, oh no. What that means is, unfortunately, in your high school, there's inflation. There's grade inflation. And do colleges know this? Yes, they do. They know about your schools, right? So that's why I always ask, what school do you go to? Because then I can think, okay, this is what it looks like, at Beckman or whatever it is. And so, do all colleges count? Do they know all things? Well, if you're applying to USC, they know. They know about your school. They know how it works. They know what they do. And that's the reason why in your high school, sometimes your AP class plus your AP test results, it's a reflection of the quality of the class that you have in your high school, the quality of your teacher, which then is your quality, right, when you submit it. So, you want to take enough AP classes, but not so much that it's going to, you're going to start scoring really bad, because you need some good scores. So if you're like let's say if you're like a social science or humanities major student and you got like a low score on your AP physics class, I'm going to be like, that's fine, right? But if you tell me you're going to apply to Yale, I'm like, it's not fine anymore. It's got to be a 5. Do you see? It depends on the school that you're applying to and what like what it's worth or what it's not. Again, tests, APs and SATs and ACTs used to be 30%. This was before COVID and all things like that. But now, because not all colleges are requiring SAT and ACT scores, it's about 20. And the biggest weight difference, like 10%, went into everything else, which is your activities, community service, clubs, sports, summer programs, internships, and the X factor. So if you are a little bit more aware of like what happened in the last couple of years, there was a lawsuit against Harvard, right, or a lot of the Ivies, where it was sued by, like basically Asian student that said, oh, you're looking at, you're not just, you should be looking at my merits, but all schools have what is called an X factor. They won't tell you what it is, but they will use it, right? And depending on the year and depending on what's happening, it will change your results, okay? And how do you know this? Ask your students. When they're juniors or they have senior friends, you're gonna hear all kinds of things. Oh, he got into that UC, but how come he didn't get into the other UC? For sure that kid was gonna go to like a fantastic school, but he didn't get into anywhere, right? Or things like that. I always want to know, I want to see their application. I want to know how it was put together, because you could have fantastic grades, you could have fantastic activities, but you got to put it together in the way that's like understandable, easy for the admissions office to read it and go, okay, everything is consistent, right? From what you say, from what you do to what you want, it creates a complete picture, and that's what they're looking at too, right? Question I get is how to choose. Well, grades, your activities, tell me what you want to do, okay? Tell me where you want to be. right? And then honestly, like I just really just try to get to know the person, right? Because a lot of times you have a lot of wonderful activities and things that you've done. You're just not aware of it, right? And actually, those make the most fantastic essays. It's things that you're not aware of, because I want to go back to the beginning of my talk, which is basically because you've compared yourself. You're like, well, I'm not that, so I don't think I should be writing about this. And so when I have a conversation, I was just like, I didn't know you had those activities. And they're like, oh no, it's just so common. I was like, no, it's not. Because the thing is, you're looking at the 35 other people in that box in your classrooms. I'm looking at you compared to hundreds of thousands of students that apply to college. So it's different. So I have, and your hopefully your high school counselors too, or if people, whoever you talk to that has expertise in this area, should know that. There is a wide range of things, but oftentimes it's because everyone wants to do exactly the same thing, and that becomes a problem. Because when you do that, colleges are looking at all the same things. So guess what? They get to pick the slightly best version of that for their school. So you want to be outside of that. So if you're Asian and I'm like, okay, you're doing all the Asian things. You're doing piano, you're doing the math competitions. I'm like, okay, what else do you like to do? Like, what is your hobby, right? So that at least that can be part of your college application. All those other things are great, but the thing is, all of those things are the same things that the other students in the Irvine School District have. I know, because I work with them. So I'm like, can we do something a little bit different? And then if you're younger, commit to that a little bit earlier, right? You yourself actually know the things that you really enjoy. Don't let that go, right? Unless it's like video games, then you can let that one go. That's not gonna help you that much. I have very few students that are going into esports. Like, I'm gonna be an esport. I was like, do you know how many how many people want to go into esports? It takes thousands of hours. I was like, if you're committed, I'm a go. Right? We're going to work on that. But if you're like, kind of interested, I'm like, no, we need more commitment, right? So I'll ask you, how committed are you to being a pilot, being an actor? I get everything, right? And they're like, I'm thinking about it. Okay. In the meantime, what are some of the other things that you like enjoying to do? So the more exposure that you have, the better it is. And guess what? When you apply, let's say you apply to a fancy school as a science major, they're not looking for all the things that were science related. They're actually looking for students that are like different. Like, you liked art, but you like science. Like, that's like the classic simple one. Like you like finance, you like numbers, but you really like bugs. Like, they like those kind of combination of things. And the ability for you to articulate that in your essay, so basically it's like trying to put the best version of you on paper that you don't realize yet. Because you're only looking at yourself from the perspective of your parents, which can be sometimes very difficult. 2, it could be your peers that you're comparing yourself to, right? And what you think about yourself. Pastor Keith says this all the time, but that's not actually truth, right? There is in all of that, there is some form of truth, but there's more, right? There's more that you could put in your application than you realize, right? So at every level, whether you're getting fantastic grades or you have bad grades and you have like lots of activities, all students actually feel exactly the same way. They feel like they're not enough. Sometimes they'll come in and they'll go like, oh yeah, I think I can do all this. But I hear, oh, it's because you're nervous about the possibilities. But really, it's like identify the things that you're really interested in. Build on that. Like, you all have like gut instincts about who you are, and you've had them for a long time. It's not a new thing. It's just that you have a lot of information that's just sort of like you're bombarded with. So it's hard to kind of tell what it is that you really want to do, that you're really thinking about, and the other part, which is, what do I need to be doing? How do I feel accepted? Shouldn't I be doing X, Y, and Z? And I would say that your application, your future, is somewhere in the middle of all of that. And you're just trying to figure that out. Honestly, the reason why I gotta say I really enjoy this process is because when I was in high school, I didn't have any of this. It was just like, apply, you know? And that's what I did. And this is how honestly I made my decision, okay? We didn't have a lot of money. We're an immigrant family. I was the first. And when I said that when I was younger, I wanted to be a fighter pilot, it's because I watched the movie Top Gun, yes. That long ago, okay? And then later on, I wanted to be Indiana Jones, if you know Indiana Jones, right? I was influenced by what I saw in the movies, right? Because I didn't have any other things, right? And then I had a fantastic English teacher my senior year. So I decided that, oh my goodness, I want to be an English major, okay? Mind you, I come from an immigrant Korean family who was really stressing professionalism, like be a professional, right? And I said, I want to be an English major. And my dad said, but you already speak English. You know, why do you have to go to college for that? He's like, why don't you be a nice pharmacist, right? And I was like, but I want to do that, right? And so, and then how I picked my college was I wanted to go to UC San Diego. Okay, honestly, because a lot of my students, I know how you feel, like, because it's beautiful. It's like the beach, right? So I went on a campus tour, like a lot of you will, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is where my practical side came in. I was like, it's really far. I don't think I can get from this class to this class in time. I don't think this is gonna work out. I'm not that fast. I don't like to run. I'm short. It takes me a lot of steps, right? So I was like, this campus is not for me. Also, they had that inverted library. Have you ever seen it? It looks like something out of Star Trek. And maybe it was a joke and it wasn't the truth, but they said that they forgot to put in the weight of the books. So they had to make these pillars to make the library stable. I know, to this day, why do I remember this? But I was like, okay, I'm not going to the school. The intelligence, I don't know. For some of you that went to UC San Diego, it's different. Their starting GPA is like a 4.5. I know, okay? And then I went to the school that I ended up going to, which was UCLA. I stood on the quad. It was at night, and I looked at the library, and I was like, oh, I like this. I'm done, right? At that time, it was different. And for a lot of your parents, when they think of your safety school or the school that you have an automatic shot of getting in, it's from their past history. They're like, you should be able to get into school, no problem. UCI starting GPA is a 4.2. You're Asian. That's where it starts, okay? So that's the reason why there is, I think, sometimes like misunderstanding because things have changed so much. I mean, it's changed so much in the last year. And the thing is, all of you have exactly the same goal. You want your student to be successful, not just career, but just a successful person, right? Happy, contented, doing the thing that they like. And for you students out there, you want the exact same thing. But the path is just different. It's not always so clear, right? And there's a lot of bumps in the road. And so I'm here just to make sure that there is enough like facts and things like that to get started, to think about it. Most of you will be applying to UCs and CSUs. Some of you will want to apply to schools that are out of state, okay? Most of the time when you're applying to schools out of state, it's usually because one, they have a better academic program, and two, they will give you money, right? Because sometimes it's less inexpensive to go to a school outside of the state than the UCs, depending on what it is that you're going for. Okay, so in terms of how to choose, there are, again, many factors. Now, I'm going to end with a little bit of this, and then I will take any questions that you have. How to write personal college essays. Okay, it's simple and hard, okay? It's simple because it's your story. It's hard because it's your story, and you had no practice telling your story. And in a way that's understood by someone that's not you, okay? And so that is what really happens. It's like, you know, when they ask you a question, you are all thinking, what do they want to hear from me, okay? Because this is, and then you write from that perspective. You write what you think they want. And then you're like, for those of you who are a little bit like, oh, I need an example, you will start searching for essays on the internet. And then you will find an essay, you're like, okay, if I do it like this, then it should be okay because this kid got into Stanford. I'm gonna borrow some of these things, and I'm going to use it, okay? Or you're going to look at essays on the internet and go, how did that kid get into Stanford with this essay? It's because you didn't see the whole application. You only saw one essay, right? And if you try to use the essay for yourself, you're not that kid. So then you start sounding like some other person. And if I know you a little bit, I'll start reading your essay and I'll say things like, oh, why were you thinking when you wrote this? And then you tell me, well, I saw this essay on the internet. And I'll be like, oh, okay, let's just take that out. For most colleges, for the UCs, this is what they tell us. I go to these conferences, and this is what they tell us. They say they just want to hear about you, get to the point, be clear, and give examples. Okay? It's not actually a personal essay. It's actually like an interview question. It's like someone asked you, what do you like to do, right? And then you start talking, okay? And then I'm like, have you done that for a long time? You're like, well, I've been doing it for a while. And then you start talking, and I'll go, okay, that's your whole essay right there. That's your skills essay. You're like, what? And then I'll ask you, can you just write down what you just told me? And then you'll start doing this. My greatest talent and skill are, you'll start writing that essay as though you are writing a high school essay. And that's the reason why writing essays take a long time, right? So it's very simple, but it's hard because it's your story and trying to figure out what parts of you that you want to put on paper, right? Because you want to talk about your academics, you want to talk about your passions, you want to talk about like the things that you did over the summer, right? That had prepared you for something. Right? And basically, it's that. They take these 4 essays, and it complements you. Basically, it's things that, so I always ask, what do you want to say about yourself? And then I get back, what do they want to hear from me? Right? So it's that. So that's why it takes time to write. And there's things that you want to say about yourself that you don't know yet. Because you need time to think, and sometimes you need time for people to just ask you questions. So you think about the thing that's already inside of you, but it's not revealed until that question is being asked, okay? So that's how the essay process works. You can take a look at a lot of personal essays on the internet, and there's lots of books about them, but unfortunately, they'll give you a template, but there's no template for you, right? So it's like an outline, but you still have to say things about yourself, right? And they like to know most relevantly what you did in high school, like the last 2 years, right? I do mock interviews with my students because some colleges will require them. Like if you're applying to the Claremont McKenna colleges, they like to interview students. So I will interview my students. And so sometimes I'll ask this question. I always ask this question, actually. I ask them, tell me a little bit about yourself. And I get all kinds of stuff. I get like, when I was 5 years old, I want to be Superman. I was like, oh, okay. And then we go through the whole thing for like 15 minutes, and I'll go, remember when you said when you started when you were 5? And my student, it's all the same. It's hard. It's an open-ended question. Like, what would you guys say? I go, let's not start when you're 5, okay? Let's speed it up, and let's talk about like what you did last summer. Because that's easier. It's something very specific, and if you start with something very specific, you just get more specific. If you start with things that are very broad, you will remain broad. And so if I replace you with any other student, you will be the same student. Every student will be the same. So for the personal essays, you need to have enough detail about yourself that looks like you. So how do you check? You ask 3 people, no more than 3, because everyone will tell you something different. Right? You ask a friend that is close to you, that knows you well enough. You ask one of your parents, not both, because they might be in conflict, okay? And then you ask a third person. And you ask, does this sound like me? Does this look like me? Do you like me at the end of this essay? Because I'm sure a lot of you are very likable, but some of you in the essay, you don't sound so likable. That happens too. So does it sound like me? Does it look like me? Do you like me? That's it. That's the check. I know, it's so simple, but it's so difficult at the same time. So basically that is, hopefully I gave you enough. So that's pretty much it. And then in terms of like your specific criteria, it really just depends, okay? Are there any questions? I'll take broad questions, specific questions. If there's things that I didn't address, please ask. Okay. Anyone have any questions? Sure.
First of all, thank you for doing this seminar.
Oh, no problem.
I have a question pertaining to APs. Is there a recommended number? So about a year ago, I attended a Uci, application seminar, and they recommended a minimum of 8. Is that your experience or what you would recommend?
Yes. They do 8 is because, for the most part, there's only a certain number of APs UCs will take. So it's based on that recommendation. So they'll take like only certain semesters of APs. Broken down over the years, it depends on your school district, because Irvine School District won't allow students to take certain number of APs until they hit their junior year. So the majority of your APs will be in your junior and your senior year. Sometimes it ends up being 4 and 4. Sometimes you can take 1 or 2 APs during your freshman and sophomore year. For schools outside of the UCs, if you're looking at, let's say, the top 15, top 10, top 15 schools, you would need to take more for those particular schools, especially in your area of major and interest. So if you're going to be a strong STEM major, then you would have to max out on all of the STEM classes available at your particular school, and then do a little bit more depending on the school itself. But yes, it is around 8. Yeah. Any other questions? No questions? You guys are good? All right. Let me see if there's any last things I can tell you. If you're going to be a senior and this is a summer where you're applying, you're thinking about, you're getting ready to apply for schools, Uci Applications open up August 1st. Okay? It doesn't mean you submit August 1st. It means that application is open to you. They will start taking submissions October 1st. This has never happened in the history of the UCs. It's because last year the website crashed many, many times and they had to extend deadlines. What has happened, because they've taken away the SATs and ACTs, more students are applying to colleges. On average, each college gets a 20% markup in terms of how many students are applying. So they have to go through many more applications. That's why I think certain schools are bringing back the SATs. They needed to weed out people. It was so that it would help like economically disadvantaged students that couldn't take the SATs, even though academically they were qualified. Right? The reason why I'm saying this for the UCs is because if you are planning to apply to the UCs, apply earlier, not later, okay? Because most students will start writing their essays around Thanksgiving time. That's why there's so much stress, and then they'll submit it right on the dot. The thing is, some of you are thinking, well, I do better when I procrastinate. That's a lie. You don't. You think you do. You have to believe it to make it happen, but it's a total lie. Because I read your essays at the last minute. I'm like, oh, I wish you would have worked on this a little bit earlier. It would have been so much better for you. Because you can't pump out deep thoughts. You know, if you're my student, you'll know. I'll go, can we go deeper? I'll go, can we go deeper in paragraph 2, right? It's things like that. You need time. And then it will help you because you know that you didn't do it under stress circumstances. You will continue to do it under stress circumstances because that's what you've learned in high school. You learned to do everything in 5 minutes. And your ability to have great short-term memory is awesome. But college applications do not work that way. So please give yourself a little bit more time. They open up August 1st. Please take a look at the application and start thinking about what you're going to say so that when you start school, you won't be bombarded by all the other things you have to do, sports, classes, having fun with friends, whatever it is, and then you'll get it done so that you can enjoy your turkey, kalbi, whatever it is during Thanksgiving, and you won't stress out your whole family. It won't be like a whole family affair, you know? So do it early so that you can give yourself time. That is like my #1 tip. You get it done so that you can spend your time polishing the things that you need to polish. When the application opens up October 1st, submit it within the first 10 days, you're done. There's no letters of recommendations that you need for the UCs unless you're applying to a specialized Berkeley program and then they recommend one, but you don't need to, okay? So just get it done. CSU applications open up October 1st. Some of them will have deadlines at the end of October. A lot of them will have deadlines past. Students, you're going to look at this and go, I'll do this later. No, do it then. Because it's about first come, first serve. Get it in, your chances are going to be higher for at least some of the CSUs. UCs and CSUs work differently. CSUs, if you live in the local area, chances are higher you're going to get into the CSU. UCs is the opposite. The closer you live to UCI, the harder it will be getting to UCI, but easier it will be getting into UC Davis, UC Santa Barbara, as long as you meet their requirements, okay? Why? Because if you live far, that means you have to dorm. It means they make money, okay? Let's be for real. Colleges are about your education, but they're also a business. They want to make sure that things are happening because they build, if you notice. Every time you visit a UC, they're building something. And then it rains and then it collapses, like at UCLA, okay? But you want to make sure that you get those things done so that by the time you hit October, everything is done. That means in November, guess what? You're just preparing for your finals. You take it in December. You find out your results. The earlier you apply, the first wave you're going to be in. So they start sending out acceptances. This past year at Berkeley was early. They started doing it in February. But usually it's between March and second week of April. CSUs have been earlier. So you start getting them back, okay? Any other questions? Yes. Yes and no. What they'll do is they'll just take a look because, especially for the ones that have later deadlines, but the bulk of the CSU applications come, they will see them in October. So that's why, in some sense, it is rolling. They might not say that, but that is what they do, right? Because they want to make sure they have guarantees. So anytime a school sends out like an acceptance letter, they're calculating what is the response back. So that's why you'll hear like funky stories, like my student got into like UC Santa Barbara, but got rejected by Cal State Fullerton because they know you will not be taking Cal State Fullerton, so they'll immediately reject you up front, okay? And for UCs, some students will get, accepted to all of them, but sometimes you might get accepted to Berkeley and not UCLA, Santa Barbara, but not UCI, things like that, right? So that's the reason why they like to know what schools you're applying to too, right? But last tip is if you ever have to interview for a school for any reasons, please do not tell them that you are thinking about other schools. When you go into the interview, they are number one for you. You're like, you're number one. I like your program. This is what I want to be. Stuff like that, okay? Because sometimes my students, I'll be like, why did you say that? It was a no from the first minute. I was like, be honest, but you're at an interview for a job. So if you're at an interview for a job, you're not going to say, well, I like some other companies better. That's when you're negotiating your salary. Not to get accepted is a totally different thing, okay? So keep those things in mind. And, hopefully a lot of you guys are going to be returning to school in about, 20 days? Something like that. I know, it's so sad. I feel like the summer was really short for you. But just do a few things so that when you do apply, it won't feel so overwhelming. Because I know families are overwhelmed, you're overwhelmed. So try to do a few things so that, so by the time that when you apply, you don't get paralysis, which happens a lot, which is I got so much to do, and then you completely shut down. You can't do any of it. It's overwhelming, right? One step at a time, and you'll be fine. All right. Thank you, everyone.